Hello, it is Tegan, and today's upcycling adventure is dealing with coffee filters. Specifically, how to turn coffee filters, dyeing them, and cutting them to make pom-poms and garlands. So, for this project, you need coffee filters, water, food coloring, a dish to put the water and food coloring into. You also need a sewing machine or a needle and thread, and scissors. Alright, let's get into it. Alright, so before you get started with your coffee filter craft, you may want to dye your coffee filter to the color you want for your project. So you can see here I have dyed these ones a kind of a variety of kind of peachy, yellow, orange colors for a baby shower. You may want them white, depending on what you're doing, but to dye them all you actually need is a tray of some sort, pan, Tupperware, something that you can put them in, water, and food coloring. So for just regular water from my tap and just whatever colors you want to make happen. You may need some basic color mixing theory. We're talking like elementary school stuff here, remembering that red and yellow make orange, or blue and yellow make green, red and blue make purple, because those don't necessarily come in food colorings or in all food coloring sets. So here, I'll show you. I already have some water here that's kind of yellow-orange. I'm going to add a little bit more water and show you just how I added it in. You don't necessarily need that much. And you may want to wear gloves because food coloring can dye your hands. Because of the colors I'm using, it's not that big a deal for me. So I'm going to add a little bit more yellow. And I'm going to add in a little bit, this is neon pink, but this is gel. Some neon pink gel. And so I'm going to have to mix it in with a toothpick. And the neon colors tend to be brighter. The more dye you use, obviously the brighter it will be. So if you want just a really light pastel, you don't even need very much. So just kind of mixing that in. And you can kind of see how you may be able to see or not, there's kind of dots of gel still there. And that's okay, depending on the effect you want. If you want it to be all completely solid, you may want to mix it in more. But I kind of like having a bit of a marbled effect. So all you do, take some of your coffee filters. You can do it one by one. I recommend grabbing kind of a bunch and you stick them in. And you can create different effects depending on what you're doing. Some people like the edges to have a different color for what they're doing. It's not necessarily what I'm going for here because I'm actually going to cut many of these up anyway. And then go ahead and squeeze out the extra. Kind of see they're colored. And it will vary a little bit on the inside. Like it won't be as dark maybe, or there could be rings. I like that effect. If you don't, I wouldn't make sure you're doing smaller piles if you don't want there to be as much variance. It kind of just depends on what you're going for. So I'll set these aside to dry. And I'll show you just one more time. You can see I already got some food coloring there. That's okay. And I've even done it like this. Just want to make sure the color goes all the way through. And there you go. I'll squeeze out some of this. Kind of be careful with the squeezing. You don't want to dye anything, splatter outside of what you have going on. So you can even see some variance here. This side is actually a little bit more orange than this side. I don't know if that will be visible on the camera or not, but yeah. So I'll set these aside to dry. So I already have some that I've dyed that I'm going to show you the technique I've been doing for this garland project. In my pom-poms, move some of this aside. All right. So I have been cutting to make the most use out of my my coffee filters. You could certainly use them in circles this size. You don't have to do this, but for what I wanted, the size I wanted smaller circles. I wanted to make the most out of my filters. So what I'm going to show you here, and take about 3 filters since they're already dyed. If they weren't dyed, you could probably cut more at a time. I'm going to fold it in half. And then I'm going to fold it in half again. So I have quarters. Essentially I've folded it into quarters. And you don't, there, so you can see that. So now I'm going to use this as my template because it fits, it's about a 3-inch circle. And it fits really nicely around. For me, I'm very comfortable using this as a template and cutting around it, especially because I'm not trying to get 100% accurate circles necessarily. But if you would feel more comfortable, you could certainly make a template out of like a piece of cardboard. Felt works really well for something like this because it will grip it a little bit, and it's flexible. It's a little easier to hold on there sometimes. But I'm comfortable with this, so I'm going to do that. And then I'm just going to cut around. Taking care not to shift the template that I'm using. And so on this edge where they're all connected, I want to make sure to cut all the way through. If you don't, it's not a big deal, but you might have to do some trimming. So now you can see I have quite a few circles. So 4 circles for each coffee filter I just cut. So this next thing I'll show you with these circles, one of the things I'm making are these beautiful little hanging pom-poms. And you can fluff them out a little bit more. Yeah. So I used, I believe I used 10 circles. You could use more or less. It all depends on what you're going for. And I did use the sewing machine, but you wouldn't have to. All I did was I folded one of the circles in half, put it on the top so I could see the crease, and then I stitched along it, and I left a nice long tail of thread to hang it by. So you could sew like I did here on the sewing machine, which for me is easy. I have one set up, it's no big deal. But if you don't have access to that, you could certainly use just a needle and thread, and I can show you that right now. So on this one, I'll go ahead and just fold this one in half to get a line that I'm going to sew. I'm going to go ahead, I have a clip here, I'm going to hold together just to keep the papers together. Length of thread on here, I do have it doubled up, and a needle. This probably may not be the best size needle for this, but I'm just going to go ahead and do that because I already got it going. Alright, I'm going to tie a knot here. And I'm just going to sew a running stitch down that crease through all of my pieces. So, not sewing the straightest line right now. One thing about sewing through paper that can happen, especially on your sewing machine needle, it can dull your needle. So if you do a lot, it's just good to like change your needle often anyway, but maybe save one of your needles that you just use for paper crafting when you're sewing paper. It's not a bad idea. I would use a bigger needle than what I'm using. This is just what I had on hand that I was ready to use. It's a bit smaller, but I would use a bigger needle. Kind of struggling with this a little. Wish I had a little bit more. Okay. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and tie a knot. I'm going to do it differently than you would if you were sewing fabric, just because it's a little harder to go through. Okay. All right, took care of that twirl. I'm now going to just tie a knot. Okay, and I have a tail. As you can see, I do have a tail. You can see my stitch, and there you go. Kind of have a good kind of dangly pom-pom. All right, so now I'm going to show you how to make a garland with the coffee filters, with the 3-inch dyed circle coffee filters, 3-inch cut and dyed. So two different styles here. This is where they're overlapping, and here is a style where they're kind of floating. I'm going to use my sewing machine. You wouldn't have to use a sewing machine. You could do this with needle and thread, but I recommend using a sewing machine for this specific type of garland. There's other options if you don't have a sewing machine. So I have my 3-inch circles that I already cut and dyed. I have my sewing machine. I'm using just a basic foot and a regular needle. It will dull your needle, but if you just have one needle that you use for paper, it's not really that big a deal. Things you want to keep in mind, I have thread that coordinates or matches my coffee filters. You don't have to have that. Maybe you want something contrasting. I don't know. It doesn't specifically matter, but it is kind of nice when they match, if that's what you're going for. And I also have changed the stitch length. Sorry, the stitch length on my machine. I didn't want my paper to get perforated too closely, because then it might want to tear. So I have it set at 3.5. So here, it's very easy. This is how you do it. I'm going to show you really quick. Hear my children coming. So for the overlapping one, all you do is you start stitching. About halfway through, you stop and you stick it on, and you just start stitching right down approximately the center of the circle. No need to like mark the center. You just kind of go for it and you keep going. So there you have it. It's pretty straightforward. And then to make one that's more of kind of a floating effect, it has a little bit more movement. Instead of overlapping, you just stitch all the way across, stop, grab another circle, and keep going. And, oh, I ran out of thread. My bobbin thread apparently came undone. But had your machine not malfunctioned, that would have worked, and you would have this garland. All right, that's how you make garlands and pom-poms, some nice party decorations. I hope this video was helpful. Please like it if it was, and thank you for watching.